We're going to go through a ulnar deviation kinetic stretch. So ulnar deviation being our ability to perform this movement here. Okay, we're going to go through this motion in a few various ways. All right, I am going to demonstrate to begin with an Indian club. This is probably the favorite piece of equipment I like to use for this, simply because the weight is centered at one end, and so at the other end it's relatively light, so it creates a good point of leverage for when I'm performing this exercise to work against. Now, I'm going to demonstrate how I would normally perform this exercise. I would hook grip the Indian club, and then I would wrap my fingers over. I'm resting my forearm over my leg, and I've got a slight bend in my elbow. Then from here, I can get quite specific with how much support I have with my arms. So if I wanted to make this maybe a little bit more challenging, I could come out a bit more. Okay. Then the exercise will be to actively contract the underlying side here, okay, to pull myself down into that ulnar deviation. And then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to contract the top sides to actively pull myself back up to the start. So I'm contracting underlying surface here of my wrist to actively pull myself into ulnar deviation, and then I'm contracting this top side tissue to actively bring the weight back up. And then I can get quite specific, for example, of what I combine this with. So I can combine it, for example, with flexion. I could combine this with extension. So as I'm deviating with the ulnar, I can add a bit of wrist extension into the movement. And that will simply change how it challenges that wrist joint. So this would probably be more of an advanced setup, holding a weight as such at its very end, and then hook gripping the thumb. But if I wanted to make the same task slightly easier, for example, I could support this weight if I wanted to. So I could, with the other hand, support as so. So I'm taking a little bit of that weight off, making the exercise a little bit easier. And the same on the way back up. If I feel I don't have that strength to actively bring it back up, I can use my hand to assist and provide a bit of support. I could also choose to hold this a bit closer to where most of the weight is. So if I went here and performed the exercise, it will feel a lot easier as the weight doesn't feel as heavy. So working my way further up is one way. For example, to make this easier, I could also remove the hook grip, and then just by performing ulnar deviation as so, same as before, I can combine it with other movements. This will make the task slightly easier. So you could be going with a normal grip, gradually working your way down to here, and then gradually progressing to, say, a hook grip, and doing exactly the same. The same exercise I demonstrated with a bent arm, but you could also go with a locked out elbow. So one way I like to do it is support my arm on my leg as so, and then I'm doing the same thing. And again, with the elbow now locked out, that will simply change how it challenges the whole wrist joint as I perform this task. Maybe this might be nicely suited for maybe racket sports, sport-specific movements. And then all those variables I provided as before, you can apply here. Now, if you don't have an Indian club, alternative options could be something like a hammer. You could also use a stick, for example, and then position the weight on one end of the stick. And I could be doing the same thing. So from here, holding the end of the stick, I could hook grip or go with a normal grip, and then focus on ulnar deviation. Depending on the weight, I could position the arm in specific areas to challenge the wrist joints more specifically if I wanted to. So those are a few options of the ulnar deviation kinetic stretch.